Finally, the adults are in charge of what's happening, and we're seeing some things just explode in the faces of the Democrat House managers in this sham impeachment trial. So, welcome, friends. I wanted to give you an update on where we stand right now. We had one full day of the president's legal team rebutting and destroying the arguments that Schiff and his minions brought to the Senate under the guise of this is really impeachment articles that are worthy of consideration. So let's talk about that briefly. It was a very busy day yesterday for the president's team. There are a few other things going on in the news that are also just as relevant and connected to this, but we'll get to them in just a second. Let's talk about what happened yesterday first, because that's what's most important. None of this other nonsense that the press would like to draw your attention to is worth anything. Yesterday, the Republican, and I keep calling Republicans in the president's team, they're almost identical except for one person, of course, but we'll get to that. The president's team began after Jay Sekulow. He served as kind of MC for the day. He introduced each of the speakers, told the members of the Senate and the TV audience what they were going to cover, and then he would sit down and then they would get up and talk. One of the first main speakers of the day was Ken Starr. Ken Starr was the former special prosecutor who investigated the Clintons back in the 90s. He was appointed. He's a long-term lawyer and prosecutor and legal scholar and expert. He's the one who developed the case. He put it all in a report called the Starr Report, where he investigated the Clintons for Whitewater and Monica Lewinsky and all the other sleazy crap that the Clintons were into. Probably just scratched the surface of that, but at any rate, so that's his expertise. He's been through this before. He's been through this impeachment before. He also is somewhat of a legal scholar. I think he was president of, was it Pepperdine Law School? I can't remember. He was a law school president. He also spent time in the Department of Justice, and so he's somebody who is well qualified to share the information that he shared. And he very articulately, very softly, gently, very professionally walked through the history of impeachment in America and showed just how aberrant the Democrats are this time, how out of phase they are with what has happened. And he hammered on the fact that this is the only impeachment that has ever been partisan, that it was brought simply by one party trying to destroy the president of the other party. No Republicans voted for this in the House whatsoever. And all the other impeachments that have happened, the other three, were bipartisan, did have support from both parties, and he walked through the history of that very clearly. He also talked about how the process of impeachment has been abused in the last several decades, mostly by Democrats, because they don't like Republican presidents. They tried to get President Reagan impeached, they tried to get George W. Bush impeached, they tried to get George H.W. Bush impeached, and now they've tried several times to get Trump impeached before they got the traction to do it this last time. Essentially, the Democrats are trying to use impeachment as a political weapon to get rid of a president they don't like. They want to spit in the face of all the American people who voted for those presidents and say, your vote doesn't matter, we're the experts, do what we want, or else. And this is nonsense. One of the other things that he clearly explained was that the article, he did talk about both articles of impeachment, I won't go through all of that again, but he clearly said that the obstruction of Congress article of impeachment is not relevant because the House did not follow proper procedures in order to issue subpoenas to the people that refused to show up. Now, what do I mean? Well, of course, they wanted Trump's inner circle to come, and they were planning on wanting to get, John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and McIlvaney, and probably a few others, because they wanted to dig up dirt as they were investigating. Of course, as I said before, Trump and his people resisted the subpoenas, citing executive privilege. In other words, the executive branch of government, the president's office, has immunity from subordination to the legislative branch. Now, that doesn't mean that the Congress doesn't have the authority to investigate and to see what may be happening in the executive branch, especially if they think there are crimes. This is the tension with this, balance of power we have, the separation of powers we have in our constitutional system. But, as I explained before, if the president said no to the subpoenas and the Democrats really wanted to pursue this, they needed to file with the Supreme Court to have them make a ruling on it. And then if the Supreme Court ruled that these people had to testify, that the subpoenas were warranted, then the president would have had to comply, or he would have been obstructing Congress. So he didn't, because they did not issue the subpoenas properly. Now, and they never took it to court to get a ruling from the Supreme Court. Why didn't they issue the subpoenas properly? Because power-mad Nancy Pelosi didn't take the time to do things right. The only way that an impeachment inquiry can commence is after a full vote in the House. Every member of the House gets a chance to vote on that. She did not. She started Schiff on doing this before there were any House votes. Schiff had all of his secret bunker meetings before there were any House votes. Republicans were excluded. You know all the story on that. They finally did take a full House vote to pursue impeachment inquiries well into the process. And then from that point on, any subpoenas issued would have been legitimate. But they didn't issue any after that vote. So it's a red herring what they're saying with this obstruction of Congress. And Starr pointed that out very, very clearly, very historically. He talked about the history of impeachments. He explained how the different people prosecuted the cases and why the past presidents were ultimately exonerated and not removed from office. Even in the case of Clinton, somebody who did break the law, clearly. So, and then also later in the day, I think it was it Robert Ray, I believe his name was, who became special prosecutor after Starr, continued explaining the history of that. So it was a very powerful presentation, very professional, and it certainly gave perspective to the hack job that Schiff and his minions are attempting here, and the lousy work they did in the House, and then expected the Senate to clean up their mess. Now, he and Ray were just the first two of several who presented. Let me just touch base on a couple others. In the middle of the day were the presentations that the Democrats did not want to hear whatsoever, and that was when Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida, got up, and she was followed by another special prosecutor by the name of Eric Hirschman. Both of their presentations showed all the evidence that points to the Biden corruption, the Hunter Biden corruption in Ukraine, and Joe Biden, as at the time Vice President, was money laundering, and they just laid the case out there. Now, why did they do that? Because the Democrats, the Democrat managers, in their presentation, repeatedly said, there is no corruption to be seen with the Bidens. It's all been debunked. We don't have to deal with it. Any arguments trying to claim Hunter Biden was somehow involved are irrelevant to this whole case, blah, 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 blah. In other words, they didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Well, Pam Bondi and Eric Hirschman went there. They laid out the whole case, all the evidence. They showed the payment records to Hunter Biden. They showed the timeline. They replayed that video of Biden bragging about how he got the prosecutor fired, or he would withhold the $1 billion of aid to the Ukraine a few times. They showed even all the other mainstream media stories where it showed the problems with Hunter Biden and Burisma, and not just in Ukraine, but also the corruption that went on with Biden's company in China. How his company, just a couple weeks after Joe and he went to visit the Chinese, suddenly his company gets $1.5 billion payment from China. So this was all laid out there, and it really made the Democrats look like a bunch of fools, because they wanted to say, oh, there's nothing to see here. Well, for the next hour, just document and interview and statement after document and interview and statement were put before the Senate to show that they're liars, that the Democrat managers are liars, that there is a smoking gun there with Hunter Biden. So even if they want to say that Trump was concerned about having the Bidens investigated for their corruption in Ukraine, there was absolute justification for that, because they were and they are. Now, whether or not they will ever serve any kind of jail time for their criminality, remember, this is our tax dollars that were wasted. That $1 billion of aid didn't come from Biden's pocket. That came from all of our pockets. And of course, if $1.5 million or whatever total was funneled back to Hunter Biden from that also is our money that went into his pocket. This is corruption at the highest levels, and it needs to be dealt with. Maybe not in this impeachment, but it still needs to be dealt with. So Pam Bondi and Eric Hirschman just blew that argument right out of the water. We also saw, I can't remember her name, another woman got up and defended Rudy Giuliani, which, he's the bad boogeyman in the Democrats. He's the corrupt guy. He's Trump's fixer, they would say. And the truth of the matter is, what she laid out was a very powerful case to show that Rudy Giuliani is just doing what any good defense attorney would do, protecting his client. And he is uncovering all kinds of stuff. And hopefully Rudy's not done. He's talking about millions and millions of dollars that the Bidens have enriched their family with because of the fact that Joe was vice president. Let's hope he can continue doing his thing. And whether or not you like Rudy, it's irrelevant. He was a prosecutor for many decades. He brought a lot of members of the mob in New York State to justice, and he was somebody who was one of the top cops in the country, shall we say. So let's see what happens with that. But that's not, relevant to this directly right now anyway. Finally, in the evening, the Trump's defense team brought their cleanup hitter, their heavy artillery out. They brought Alan Dershowitz, former professor at Harvard Law School, registered Democrat, somebody who loved the Clintons, voted for Hillary, is not a Trump fan as far as his policies go, but he got up and he defended the Constitution, and he did it very intensely, very thoroughly. He went through all the previous court rulings. He went through all the statements from the founding fathers, from the former chief justices of the Supreme Court. I mean, he had the whole history right there. And he blew apart all of the arguments, the legal arguments that the Democrats were making, that, oh, you don't have to have a crime for impeachment. Oh, these two articles are legitimately serious to warrant impeachment. I mean, he tore their arguments completely asunder, very professionally, very articulately. I mean, it was like sitting in a college classroom listening to a lecture, but from somebody who's very passionate and thoroughly knowledgeable about the subject. So he just ripped Schiff's nonsense to pieces. As Schiff looks like a kindergartner compared to him as far as his legal knowledge. And it was pretty amazing to see. So that was their first full day. Today there's another day coming. I'm not sure what else they're going to do, but it'll be interesting to see. But the trial continues on. Now there are a couple other things going on here too that I did want to mention as kind of corollaries to what happened yesterday. As I told you in several of these previous updates, keep watching for the latest bombshell to be thrown by the Democrats. Oh, something new is going to come out. They already tried it with Lev Parnas, and that kind of fell flat. Well, yesterday they had another one. Oh, John Bolton says Trump really was tying the aid to, investigating the Bidens. And of course, the mainstream media, they had a cow over it. They were just thrilled that they didn't have to talk about or focus on the Trump defense. And that's why the Democrats had this leak happen exactly when this was going to happen from the Trump legal team, to steal their thunder. This is political strategy. It's sleazy, it's slimy, but that's who the Democrats are. Now let's talk about this. John Bolton was a former national security advisor for Trump, and they parted ways on less than amicable terms. I think Bolton wanted a war with Iran. Bolton was more of a hawk than Trump is as far as war goes, and they didn't agree, and so Trump got rid of him. He didn't leave on good terms, shall we say. Now, supposedly, he's been writing a book about his experiences, and what was leaked was there's supposed to be something in the book where Trump really did want the Bidens investigated as a condition of aid to Ukraine. Okay, let's look at this. First of all, this story was published in the New York Times. They cited an anonymous source who claims to have read the manuscript, the draft manuscript, not the final one, and that it claimed that. There were no direct quotes from the book. We don't know who the source is, or even if the source really even exists. This is nothing that Bolton has stated. In fact, I think his lawyers denied any connection with that, with that leak. So we don't know if this whole thing's just been fabricated by the Democrats at the New York Times. We don't know if this anonymous source was lying to them. We don't know if this anonymous source ever even saw a copy of Bolton's book. It's supposed to come out in a couple months, but, who knows and who cares? He's another sour grapes kind of, I didn't get my way, so I'm going to pout. So they tried to make this into a huge deal, and it really is another nothing burger, another one of those bombshells that the fuse fizzles out and doesn't go off. And that's all you need to know about it at this point. It's irrelevant, because the fact of the matter is, even if Trump wanted to do that, that doesn't follow the facts of what actually happened. If you've seen anything with Jim Jordan over the past several months, he said there are 4 facts that never change in this, and I won't regurgitate them here. You can listen to them. Everybody's reciting them. At least everybody wants the truth. That prove that there was no quid pro quo, the very thing that the Democrats claim happened. So even if, in Bolton's opinion, Trump wanted to do that, even if he had a conversation with Trump where Trump suggested that, it didn't happen. So you can't throw a guy out of office for something he said but didn't do. That's insanity. How many times have we said things that we regret? Things that, I am angry at this person, or I want to see them get hit by a bus, or, but we're not guilty of any crime just because we got angry. Now, I'm not saying Trump did this, and he's already denied it several times, but I'm saying even if he did, it's certainly not an impeachable offense. So it's a nothing burger. Just put it away and forget about it. Another interesting thing that's come out of this whole impeachment thing is Senator Ted Cruz has become an internet sensation. He has started doing podcasts where he's cutting through the hype and being interviewed and sharing his opinions about what's going on with the impeachment. I can't remember how many he's got out now. I've watched 1 or 2 of them. And they are very good, because Cruz is very articulate. He's very passionate. He's a legal scholar. He's got good perspective on things. And he has certainly become a Trump fan now compared to when they were running against each other. But his podcast is the #1 podcast in the country. Just out of nowhere, he just started doing this, and suddenly he's being listened to by millions of people. So this kind of gives you an idea just how hungry the American people are to get better news sources than the garbage they get from the mainstream media. More and more people are turning off those clowns because they know they're not really reporters, they're just paid Democrat hacks. So my point is that the fact that Cruz's podcasts have become so popular so quickly tells us that people are just fed up with the crap we've been fed by the media. And rightly so. It's time for new news sources, trusted news sources, people who aren't so biased that they can't see straight. Another thing that has happened is the Trump popularity continues to grow. I just saw an article this morning that Trump is doing a rally tonight in Wildwood, New Jersey. I think I mentioned that in one of the last ones. There have been over 175,000 ticket requests for that rally. 175,000 in the blue state of New Jersey, in the resort community of Wildwood that's filled with rich people and tourists, in the summertime. That's the kind of support and popularity that is growing for this president. And if the Democrats don't wake up, and I certainly hope they don't because they're too arrogant to see the truth, I hope they're going to be relegated to the dustbin of history because they're just so out of touch with the American people. Obviously, 175,000 people aren't going to get in to see Trump. I forget what they said the largest arena or indoor venue in Wildwood will hold. It's under 10,000, I think. So I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, there are going to be lots and lots and lots of people who won't get in. But I saw in the news article how this time of year, Wildwood is a ghost town because it's not the summer beach season. But right now, the hotels are busting at the seams. They can't put up all the people who want to be there for this. And of course, then the restaurants and the nightclubs and all the other stuff are just going gangbusters. They're scrambling to get entertainment. They're scrambling to get people to work because thousands of people have come to town to hear the president. And this, again, in a blue state like a corrupt Democrat liberal state like New Jersey, turns out there really are a lot of people who love this country and love our president. So it'll be amazing to see. And as I said in my last update, this is just the beginning. He's just getting started with his rallies and his campaign rallies for this coming election season. This is going to be utterly incredible till we get to November. So this is why the Democrats are becoming as hysterical as they are. They're trying anything they can to try to slow him down. I think they realize they can't stop him now. And this nonsense with, now we're going to have witnesses because of the Bolton allegation. That's just Mitt Romney because he's still a cranky, spoiled loser who wants a little bit of attention. I think the voters in Utah need to just get rid of him. He's a joke. He's the reason we have Obamacare. I don't know if any of you know the history on that or not, but I can tell you that in just a couple seconds here. The first universal health care plan was proposed by Hillie Mae when Bill Clinton was president. She wanted to have this universal health care. Well, she couldn't get it through the Congress then. But when Romney became governor of Massachusetts, he put forth a mini version of Obamacare. They called it Romneycare. It was the same thing. It was lousy health insurance, high deductibles, government control, blah, blah, blah. When he left as governor and Barack Obama ran for office, he picked that back up again. And it was a combination of Hillary Care and Romneycare, and it turned into Obamacare. So this garbage health care plan that Obama forced on America, with high deductibles and lousy coverage and ration care and death panels and pushing pro-abortion wherever they could, all of that is tied to Romney. So he is just a despicable human being. He's somebody who should never be listened to, and I sure hope that the voters somehow in Utah will get rid of him once and for all. Let him go into retirement, write his memoirs, and pretend to be something he never was. At any rate, we'll see how this plays out. The senators have already predicted that if they call for witnesses, we're going to be here till April or May with this impeachment nonsense. Hopefully that won't happen. We've got another day of powerful testimony, I'm sure, to come today, and we'll see where that goes. So thank you for listening to this update. Please subscribe if you haven't, and hit the notifications bell so that we can get you the latest updates when they're posted. And again, I thank you for listening, and thank you for living your life as a free American.